to share with you the small but the huge good, my journey from privilege and whiteness. So I want to introduce you to my friend Kareem, and I met Kareem at the Gospel Hill Camp, which was a day camp that I ran in the St. Paul community. And Kareem is the most spunky kid I know. He loves to make up songs and raps, he loves to dance, he kind of barrels around because his body is awkward, but he's most known for loving snacks. So this is some photos. We spent a lot of time on the bus, me and Kareem. And one day, he turned to me and he was eating mini Nilla wafers, and he goes, "Miss Elise, they small, but they huge good." And we laughed and made up this little song, like, they small, but they huge good, they small, but they huge good. And I keep coming back to that. I wrote it down because there was a lot of funny moments from Kareem. But I kind of think that's my journey with privilege and whiteness. Is I've had some small moments that in the time didn't really seem that big, and I was trying to learn how this kind of culminated, but they made a huge good. So I'm going to explain to you throughout my presentation some of these small mini Nilla wafer moments and how they shaped my understanding of privilege. So growing up, I grew up in a upper middle class, homogeneous, white environment. And the mentality for me was white and black, or like race and privilege wasn't a thing because I was surrounded by white people. But the mentality was helping people and doing good was kind of instilled in me from a young age. And I think it was almost to cope with being white, or like in thinking back, it was kind of a strategy to be like, oh, well, I help people who look different than me, so therefore I am understanding of all different individuals. And my mom, she instilled like this helping heart right away. So this is Holger, and he was an individual with disability that came over to our house all the time. We ate lots of mashed potatoes, we got color a lot, but that's one example of how helping people was instilled in me. And then in 4th grade was kind of the first moment that I realized that race was a thing. And so Delante, I want to use the laser, but I can't. He's this guy in the photo, and Delante was the only black student in our 4th grade class. Actually, in the whole 4th grade, he was in my class personally. And I could tell, like, right away that Delante, he was struggling because he got made fun of, he got bullied. And one moment, I remember coming into school one day, and everyone was murmuring, "Did you hear? Did you hear?" Robert had called Delante a slave, and Delante had punched him. And so that moment to me was like, whoa, the world is bigger than I am, and then race is actually a thing. And I like to think, like, me and Delante became friends, and I like to think, obviously, my intentions as a 4th grader were like, hey, he's good, but I also tried to reflect, like, maybe it was part of that doing good that my mom had instilled in me to try to, like, cope with Delante feeling a part of our class. But he left partway through the year, and he's holding a stuffed animal, and I remember telling my mom the last day, like, hey, I want to get Delante a gift. So I got him a gift, but the 4th grade was the first time I really actually realized that, whoa, the world is bigger than me and race is a thing. So one of the reflections of kind of my upbringing and really realizing that there's a difference between doing good and being good. And so growing up, I had this mentality that doing good was a way for me to kind of cope with being white, was I'm doing good, so therefore I'm not racist. But really, in thinking back, I think there's a difference between, I can still do good, but how I approach that in my privilege now is different, and putting those experiences into my being is a little bit different. So I came to River Falls, a predominantly white institution, and in that, I really started to dive into what privilege meant and how that affected me within being involved in trainings and getting to dive in with guidance from student affairs professionals. And so one of those ways was I participated in a service spring break program called Destination, where it had a lot of guidance within privilege trainings, but also brought me to different places that I got to immerse myself in the culture. So Selma, I went on a service spring break trip, fell in love with the people and the place, and we were working with youth of Selma through theater and dance, and really giving them a voice where they didn't have a voice in that community. And I chose to go back for a summer. So I chose to be an intern in Selma, Alabama for 3 months. And in that, I witnessed the most overt racism I ever experienced or didn't even think existed today. I was 2 blocks away from Martin Luther King's Brown Chapel, and until last year, the statue said I had a dream instead of I have a dream. I lived with a kindergartner who was the first black student to go to an all-white school in Selma, and after a few months, her parents decided to pull her out because there was so much racism and bullying that she experienced. And black people are still not allowed into the country club. So it was just like a lot of learning that I had in that time, immersing myself in a culture that was different than what I grew up in. Here's some more photos. That looks looking cool. And then kind of in reflecting back on Selma as one of those experiences I had in college with privilege, I realized there's a difference between being a part of something and being something. So I went on all these experiences and I dove in feet first, but also that was my privilege, where I got to go to Selma, I got to choose to be an intern, but then I also got to choose to go home. or this is reality for a lot of people. And so I try to understand that I could be a part of these experiences, but how do I authentically share them? And me being white, how does that look to the individuals I'm like interacting with? So trying to take those experiences and bring them into a part of my being as how I approach the world as a white woman. Then after I came back from Selma, I ran a summer camp in the St. Paul community called Gospel Hill Camp. The camp itself, the demographics were 90% African American, 7% Hmong, and 3% white. And they asked me, a 22-year-old white girl, if I wanted to be the leader of this day camp, and me being naive and saying, I have some experiences, I know what privilege is, said yes. It was the most learning I'd ever experienced in terms of having to navigate not only leading kids who grew up way different than me and were displaying a lot of behaviors that were different than I had, but I also had to lead counselors who were like 15, some older than me, some in college, who were also like, why is this kid doing this? He should be sent home. Why are they saying that? It was really interesting. But I learned in that too that this was like, I had done all these privilege trainings and like, talked about the theory, but experiencing firsthand as being this white person in power was really unique to me. And through my experience at the camp, I realized the difference between cultural competence and cultural humility. And I did a lot of trainings that I'd done in college, but when I did those kind of privilege trainings, it was a bunch of white people. So it was literally like the privilege of the privilege. But then when I did these similar trainings with a super diverse staff, it really struck me as like, oh yeah, like I am the white girl, and this is how it really is supposed to feel when I'm doing these trainings. And a woman shared with me during one of the trainings, she said, Elise, you're never going to be able to be competent or understand what it's like for a person of color. But you can be human in that and be come in it with understanding and try to listen for understanding and be a human in that. And so that is something that I always kind of sticks out to me because we always say we need to be culturally competent. But I don't think we ever can be fully competent. We can come in with human understanding and relationships. So that's where it kind of all culminates back, is I've tried to, obviously I come in it from privilege, but I've made some relationships that have really solidified, relationships I like to call them, with different individuals, and how that has made me understand and come from a place of understanding in my leadership first, instead of trying to know everything. When I was at the camp, I thought I knew a lot of things. Stepping back and taking a stance of understanding first is really what I strive to do. So in the words of Kareem, I've had some small moments, but they hopefully, I think I'll continue to learn to make up some huge good.